8:45, we had published that we would have a study session opportunity to talk about no real agenda, because the only two items are the juvenile detention facility, some updates on that, and some opportunity to ask some questions, as well as the morgue impact. And again, you'll have information to report on that. So whichever one you want to start with, the morgue may be the easier of the two to, if you want to open it up and just. Well, go to the microphone.
So we've gone through this process. We're somewhere between 225 and 250,000 for the morgue addition onto the additional surplus building. Ted is getting some final numbers from the actual morgue company. We've worked through we had a kickoff meeting yesterday with all the engineers, architect, went through all the numbers, made a few modifications on the framing structure around the morgue. But that's basically a self-contained room inside the surplus building. It's got its own heat and air, own bathroom, drainage, lighting, security, and that's what's run the cost up for it. We moved it to the corner of the building because we felt like that gave us more use for surplus. But other than that, that's all we've changed.
Right, and that wasn't originally in the concept or design
No, that didn't,
when we were
that didn't
talking
come
about
about till
surplus
this fall.
facility. So
Yep.
that came to be after Vanderbilt.
That was a
Right.
hospital mandate.
Right.
Who is Ron Bruce overseeing it potentially to get there?
Yeah, well,
Or
Brian Bruce
EMS
is
or
one,
what?
EMS is managing
EMS
it,
is
but
managing.
within EMS, Brian Bruce has been the lead for them to coordinate, understand what requirements the state has for them,
So
and
no additional employee.
no additional employee at this time. Now, the day will come potentially with someone that manages full-time those kinds of activities. We do have a medical examiner that the county pays for to order the autopsies and all those things, but the EMS currently manages the Alla Hospital death process as far as getting them either to the funeral home or to our facility to hold till we can make identification or be processed forward.
It
Okay,
does-
Go over those numbers one more time. So originally the surplus.
Yeah, we had $600,000 budgeted for the construction of the surplus building, and so we're still waiting to get the exact details. So that's why I said 225 to 250. That we did have to have its own bathroom. It has to have an office. It's all conditioned. We have to have storage area. We have to have a filing area. We have to have a safe in it now that we didn't have before. We have to have a place for the family come in where they have privacy. All has to be, we have to meet the energy code.
So it'd be 225.
Mayor, I think you need to go back through why we're having to do this.
Okay, I'm sorry, say again?
Go back through why we're having to do this.
Yeah,
General public audit.
Right. In the past, and particularly as some will remember, the county owned the hospital a long time ago, so we got a lot of grace about who's responsible or who would hold Alla Hospital deaths with these bodies till they could be sent on either to forensics in Nashville or claimed by the family or whatever the final disposition would be. The last several years, the hospital business, not just Vanderbilt here at Bedford, has more and more pushed away those. It's paperwork, it's disruption to their organization when it's really not their responsibility because it did not have anything to do with in the hospital. Now, if we were managing a patient and doing CPR and we go to the hospital with them and they ultimately are pronounced dead, the hospital does manage those. We're talking about where there'd be no medical intervention in the field for those. And so we didn't have a real process for that because we didn't really experience that. But Coffee County and some other counties had already experienced the requirement to have it and do it. So it's modeled after best practices and standards for how you would manage those. And so once
But we also feel we're probably on the front end of this coming for a lot of counties. So there's really not a lot of detail on what's required. So we feel like we're getting in on the front end of that. There's really not a lot to add. I mean, they're basically requiring us to do it.
right, the surplus facility is tracking and trending for what we thought
Yes.
that would be. This
Yeah.
is because
Yeah.
it was added in addition to it. It's
Correct.
created additional costs that would not have been associated if there was no
Yeah,
more.
we actually got an update on one of the metal buildings today from one of the people that were bidding on it, and I think their number went up like $600 over the last year, so.
Yeah, so if we didn't opt to do morgue, which I don't know what we would do in the face of that if we didn't, and that's why there'll be an amendment for consideration when we go into regular session tonight that would just address this issue. So this amendment would strictly be for the morgue.
And Robert's gonna tell us where we're gonna get the money.
That's right. All that'll be discussed in the Finance Committee meeting that'll be held right after this meeting or at 4:15, whichever one comes
So we've
first.
got all the surplus now at the old building.
I think it's scattered around, but yes, that's the majority of it.
That is the
Yeah.
yeah.
And eventually, courthouse and property or whomever would dispose of that once we can get cleaned out of there, right?
Yeah, it would be open then for
And
consideration of what
that
else to do.
money would go just into the general budget? Or debt service,
Wherever the
whichever we wanna-
commission designated it to go at the time they surplused it, I think would be the most correct way for that to be dealt with.
Okay.
Yeah, so is there any other questions regarding the morgue part of this? Okay, if you're okay,
Diane's
oh, yeah, sorry, you wanna come to the mic or give her a mic or something so we can hear?
Last Tuesday, when we had our meeting and this was discussed, it said it would be a $225,000 increase. Tonight, he's saying $250,000. What's changed in a week?
Yeah, I didn't say 250, I said we're between 225, we're waiting on one number to come back.
That's not what we understood.
What would you like the number to be?
I'm sorry?
I mean, how do we don't know the exact number till,
No. We have a commitment from Bell's what to build it for. There's some things that we just don't know yet. We're probably another 2 weeks out from getting final answers. I know Ted and I have both sent multiple emails to the supplier of the actual structure for the morgue, and we're waiting on him to give us a final answer on questions that we sent him.
right. So, for Commissioner Neely, in regards to that, this sort of plays into some of these others. Being government and having to have checks and balances about how you deal with things, the only way we're gonna ultimately know the number is through a bid. And if you don't at least secure some funds that would go toward this, you're not gonna have big-time vendors or people necessarily bid it contingent on whether the county decides to fund it or not. So it's the chicken and the egg, and everybody gets uncomfortable about that, but I know you clearly wouldn't want to authorize the mayor to do a morgue and just whatever it costs, just let us know later. So you want numbers, and we've got to give you some numbers, but the only way we can give an absolute number is if we bid it. But if we bid it and you haven't approved the project, the money yet, then you're going to need to tell the bidders at the time that this is contingent on funding being secured by the commission. And so then what does that do to your bid price? I mean, I don't even know that. Come up to the mic so they can hear you.
I mean, I'm fully cognizant of all that. That
I
was my
thought you were.
concern with that 10.4 million. We did not have bids, and this is what
Correct.
has gotten us into this situation, is a failure to have bids when we're putting money together. So last week, I thought the max, whenever we talked, was gonna be in that 225. Today is 250. I'm just trying to follow the trail is all.
Right. Well, watch the trail. And again, would it be your position for us to bid without the county government saying they're even gonna do the project and just see what they come in at the price and then come back to you guys and say, here's what the bid is, but you have 20 days to honor this bid and call special call meeting and let you, I mean, there's a lot of different things the government maneuver could be, but it's the checks and balances in the system that cause us to be in these flux areas from time to time. The same thing with the, if you didn't borrow the 10.4 million, just said, well, we probably will, but let's get bids out and let's see what the real price is, the absolute price, and then we'll take it back to the commission, and if they see fit and think that's a pretty good number, then yeah, maybe they'll vote for that. We'll let you know next week. We can't even open the bids and award it because now we've got to go back to the commission and see a month or two or three that they would want to study it and decide whether they thought that was really a good number. So it doesn't matter whether you sit in this chair or I sit in this chair. You're gonna this check and balance issue of how government has to operate can't be nailed down that way. And again, I would not, if I were you, want to authorize the mayor to build a morgue and not set a dollar value that they can work within. I don't know how else you would do that. And so it puts this in place. Yeah, but I want you to go down the path. Come help us understand what you're saying there. Okay, all right. Other questions?
I just wanna make sure when we do this process, we're not saying we're gonna spend 250,000. We're saying that's what it could be. That's your budget. So far, we've been coming in under budget on actual jobs we've completed. And I'll let Bart talk about, where we are in the juvenile facility. There's about 5 stages we go through. We come up with a schematic drawing, we do concept, we do design, and then we go to construction. During the design phase is when we're trying to see where we are. If we see that there's gonna be a higher price than we all expected, then we make changes, we meet. I mean, we've probably got 100 hours in the juvenile facility just meeting and going through those numbers. But there's always an option, and that's where we are. And I'll let Bart discuss that, but we don't want to spend the county's money till we know where we are budget-wise. And I think that's important for everybody to understand, that we're gonna work within a budget.
Right, and we're not gonna build half of the facility and then come back
we're
to the
not- yeah.
commission and say, well, I don't know, cut off half of it or finish building it, and it's half standing. So again, through process and checks and balances of government, I don't know how you get around being able to give absolute firms in all directions whenever you haven't even had a vote from the commission at the end of the day.
Well, we ran into that at community. I mean, we stopped it, and then it ended up costing us $7 million to build a wing that we could have done for a third of that. So we're trying to be more proactive when we come to the finance.
And Cartwright Elementary,
Yeah.
4 years earlier, was in the $32 million range.
So I asked Bart, who's owner of Klein Sweeney, to come. I didn't ask Bales to come because we're just last minute on a lot of this. So I'll let Bart go through the juvenile facility and what
Yeah, but let me make sure there's no other questions about or the morgue. I don't wanna muddy the water. Make sure we know what we're talking about. So up to this point, we've been talking about morgue.
Just a quick clarifier, I guess, for everyone listening. When you start a project like this, you just come up with an estimated cost based on industry standards. If it's so much per foot for a 100,000 square foot building or a 10,000 square foot building, that's what you have to start with. So that, I just want to make sure that is easy to put out there, because you don't have a final number, because especially in the governmental stuff that we're dealing with, you have state that has to approve all this, and they require stuff for morgues and juvenile detention centers and things like that. So that's why the numbers always fluctuate, and we got tariffs going on, that things, it's pushing the cost up in most.
Yeah, so
stuff.
Mark, if you came to me and said, hey, I need a real number at concept or schematic drawings, I'm gonna say, yeah, it's gonna have a 10% contingency because I don't have enough information to give you that number. And as the process goes along, the contingency goes down because I've gotten hard bids, or we decide this is not a project we can afford. What can we afford? How do we get to where we can afford?
Right. And then you have, it's significant cost to the architect and the engineers and the design people. And then if you don't do the project, you've still got to pay them. So I don't know that the commission would want to approve $1 million or $2 million for all these drawings, and then in the end decide they weren't going to do the facility. So again, we're back to chicken and egg. I mean, we're trying to be as transparent, and we love that word, as we can be in the process. And as we find things that we don't think we can overcome or manage within the parameters we have, we're back to the body. I don't know what else would be most correct in regards to that. Is there anybody else that knows government process that I'm skipping something?
It's basically the same process. I mean, being over here with you great folks for 5 years now, I've been sitting on this finance committee for 5 years, and all the schools and everything like it right there that's come before us to finance for the school thing, it's the same process. The number that's put out there for a school, like Cartwright, when it started, it come in with a budget number. And then you had to lock all the details and design of what is going to be applied to that point. So it's basically, you're doing it, it's the same process, correct? I'm not confused, right?
Every project goes through the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's a widget or a car.
Now, we're getting better, and our processes are improving where we're tightening down the margin of error or the variable that we can't control. But there's still, again, unless you want to vote to authorize the mayor to build a juvenile detention facility and don't spend any money you don't have to on it when your name's called, vote for or against. We could certainly do that, and we'd never come back to you with a number. But otherwise, we're obligated to target what the best guess or best practice says it is, and then keep you informed, and then it is a tough decision. And you know, you have to vote your conscience about it. But yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanna ask Mark a question. In your previous government period,
Mhm.
like the county,
Mhm.
that's the
Is-
same process, was that the
Yes.
process you?
Yes, and on the other side of the fence, as I called it, when I was on that side for all those years on that side, I basically handled most of the bids, and I think Sylvia can back that up. And that's the way it is. You had to give them we had to give them a ballpark number for them to appropriate the money, and then you try to stay within that boundaries, and if anything comes up, you come back for more approval, whatever. So yes, it's the same process that I've dealt with all along.
So that's previous to some.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I guess if we use Cartwright as an example, our process we're using is, the most recent example is a GMP process for Cartwright. So you start with a program. The program is I need a school. That school is I need 800 students. And you hire the architect and they say, okay, go design me a school for 800 students. And the first thing you say was, well, how much that cost? Well, the architect's gonna pull some square foot cost out. He hasn't designed the school yet, nor met with your principal or your teachers. So they're gonna pull a number out of what is industry standard or what a school starts. So then you start there. And then you go through that programming process, which is typically 90 days for Cartwright. You size the school, and all of a sudden we find out, well, this isn't for 800 students, we only need 112,000 square feet in the aspect for Cartwright. And then we adjust that square foot cost to the actual square foot need. And then it went out as a CM at risk project where you basically interviewed 3 contractors. You ended up with Bell Construction as the contractor with a GMP cost. At that time, that contractor is then part of the design team throughout the rest of the design process. And at every phase of design, every 25% phase, they're providing a live estimate of what those drawings are at that time. That contractor is always putting contingency in there because he is putting a number out there without having 100% drawings at every phase. And so at a 25% phase, you may end up with a 10% contingency. At a 50% phase, you may end up at a 7% contingency. And as more information is going into the drawings, their guesswork comes down. And so at the end of the project with Cartwright, you signed a GMP contract and said, we're gonna build this school for $36 million. And in that contract, it had a contingency in there that was returned back to the owner, which you knew exactly what that dollar amount was for all the unforeseen conditions that came from the code review, the state fire marshal, what's under the ground that we don't know of. And then you got at the end of the project, you know, it cost you 36 or 35 million, you got a couple $1 million back. That is no different. That's the same process utilized on the juvenile facility. So are there any questions on that process? Because that is the process that's being used today, not a hard bid process, which the mayor and I have been through that with the county courthouse and renovating that. And so this is a managed process. And the problem is the first number that goes out is the number everybody wants to grab onto and says, that's what it is. You can't do that. You haven't gone through the 9-month process, right? And so it's a managed process, and it's got to be a good communication between the design team, the people that are going to take the building, and the contractor, and that's really what this is about, is managing the process.
And is that not how basically other counties, when they're building schools, use very similar?
Yes, yes. Everyone does something different. In some counties, we hard bid it. In some counties, we do see them at risk. I have, I bet you 75 to, well, I'd say right now in my office, 70% of my work is CM at risk. 25% is hard bid, and it depends county to county. So some people find the CM at risk GMP the best value process because they feel like they like that front end input from the contractor. So we're not designing in a path and then putting it on the streets and getting a bid and then all of a sudden just totally redoing everything. So it allows you to pivot, opposed to if you do the hard bid process, you get it all done, you put it out on the streets. Well, your pivot is a little more drastic because now it's just a total. So our process is industry standard. There's nothing new about this process. It's
So in a hard bid, you got a number there, and then you go on through
Well, you do, and you would actually bid that work out, because once you hard bid it, you really don't make any changes because you don't get the right money back. So when you hard bid it, you're 100% done, all the decisions are made, but you have risk with a hard bid. For instance, what's under the ground that we don't know about? And so all of a sudden, typically with a hard bid, we're telling the owner, hey, put an 8%, put a contingency away, because we're gonna have change orders. Industry standard on a building, if the architect's doing his job, the engineer's doing his job, the owner's providing a good project, if everybody's doing good, we're gonna hit within 2%. So if they say that project's 33 million bucks on a hard bid, it can be 2% over, and everybody's doing a good job. That's industry standard.
But you also have to remember, if something got missed or something went over, it's not like on the GMP where it's 5%.
Correct.
They'll charge you 15, 20%. So let's say you get bad dirt and it costs you $200,000, they can basically add whatever they want to, because they already have the contract. They're the contractor. I mean, we've run into that at other projects in the last 10 years where the contractor made 15% on every change order because it was a hard bid.
CM at risk projects, they, in my opinion, work well because it basically brings the contractor to the design team and the owner day one, opposed to later. So you've hired them based off of qualifications, their general conditions cost. You know you're not getting an inflated cost because that is what the standard cost is for that contractor. You know he's qualified because you've hired him based off his qualifications. And so you're just bringing him into the process. So as you design this facility, as you go left, as you go right, you understand where you are before you write the check to build the building. And he gives you a guaranteed maximum price, which says, I can't go over this amount. And he's got contingency in there. And typically that contingency comes back to the owner. He could utilize all that contingency for his unforeseen conditions, and that be fine because we knew no better. We knew it's in there, but we did not anticipate it coming back to us. Right. So in some cases, the larger projects, you typically see it come back. In the smaller projects, they're smaller margins. So we're trying really hard to stay within that number.
You still have to have drawings, though. You still got
Yes.
architect fees, all those things
All
before
those
it can
things.
ever be bid, even for hard bid, correct?
All those things
Yeah.
still exist. So there's no questioning the process of CM versus hard bid. And really, when you have to stretch your funds and you have a lot of different things you're trying to do with funds, CM at risk is probably the best opportunity for you because you can start utilizing the contractor to look. You know, if we look at the surplus building and the juvenile center, those two projects, Bell is slated to do those projects as the CM at risk. They're working with us. If you were to bid those out separately, you'd have two general conditions costs. You got the Bell already there building the juvenile, since you're going to put the surplus building in there. They don't have to hire additional project manager and additional superintendent, which is overhead to the contractor. That's 12% of the cost of construction. So in essence, you're already saving money through that process because you're not having to pay double duty for extra people. As it stands right now with the surplus building and the cost of the surplus building at the number it's at and the cost of the juvenile facility at the number it's at per design, if you were to proceed with that, we know that we're roughly 7.3 on the juvenile facility and roughly 800,000 plus or minus on the surplus. That is where we are right now at a 90% drawing phase with the contractor. We still got to get to the 100% drawing phase, right? And he'll GMP it. We know that going with the maximum security design of the juvenile facility with individual cells and all of this stuff, and it's a very hardened facility, we know what that cost is. We know we're looking at options of going to a minimum security and still stay under the children's services requirements, and that's a less cost, but that is not where we wanted to go when we started programming the structure. We wanted to go into a more of a jail type facility, not a minimum security facility. So we have options that we're talking about. We know to date that a hard facility, similar to a jail with multiple cells, is running 7.3. It provides our program that we've asked for. We can't afford that right now. We'd have to ask for a couple $1 million to make that happen. Right? So to pivot, we know what the program is, what our need is. We can go to a minimum security facility, and that's still, they're still locked up, but it may be that they have bunk rooms, right, and opposed to individual cells. It may be there's more direct supervision on the you know, the officer that's watching the inmates. So meaning I'm dependent less on cameras. I got some cameras. It's just an operational standard. So we're going to work with the juvenile group, and basically, if you give us 60 to 90 days, we can look at that option. I think it's very attainable to reach that. It is different than what we've talked about, but it sounds like it is acceptable to the county to go that direction for that type of facility. And so what we need to realize right now is the number you have on surplus, that is with Bell starting construction on the juvenile. So we need to keep those projects together. So we can't continue with the surplus at that number without the juvenile getting worked out. So we're taking those projects together because we're saving the cost, you know, with one project manager and one superintendent. When we separate them, if you started one now and then hope we got the other where it needs to be, it's just going to cost you more. So,
But you're saying potentially as minimum security standards instead of maximum security
Correct.
standards, we can come in with this juvenile detention facility as we originally talked
Yes.
about within the funds that are already purchased
Correct.
or already been borrowed.
correct. That is the goal. That feels attainable. And so, you know, when we started the programming effort, we established a cost off of those facilities, and then we met, just like I walked you through the process. So knowing that we can go to a minimum type security, we can still house the same numbers, we still provide the education component, all the components required by the Children's Services, we're just going to a different type of facility. Then that allows us to reduce our construction type, which allows us to save on cost severely. I mean, greatly. It's gonna go from, we're in the 750 to 800 square foot range. We're gonna get in the 550 to 600 square foot range.
Talking about per square foot
Per
price,
square
which
foot.
would put us down under the 5.5 or right at the.
Yeah, so what I told Jeff is we really need to basically keep the cost of the surplus, the money we have, it needs to be able to go both ways. So whatever we allocate for surplus and we have allocated for juvenile, if we end up saving money on surplus, it needs to help pay for juvenile or vice versa.
Right.
You know, because the more flexibility you provide the contractor and through these pricing rounds, and again, nobody's gonna spend your money without it coming here and you approving it.
Right.
So at the end of the day, you're gonna get a GMP, you're gonna know where it sits, you're gonna know what you got. And what we've been through is, the request was to do this, now we know what this is, and we're like, well, to get that, we don't have the dollars to do that, so we gotta pivot.
Yeah, and we also go through that twice a month.
Get to the mic, because I
So
think
twice a month, we have an OAC meeting with all that group, that team involved, the contractor, the architect, myself, Sam and Daniel are usually there on the areas that impact them. Christy Williams is in those meetings. So we want to make sure every step of the way, if there's an issue, we know about it immediately. And those are twice a month on every project we have.
so. What you're saying to us tonight, I think, if I'm hearing you guys, is that if if you could have 60 to 90 days to look at these other options, there's a high probability we could come back with something that would be within the structure and the expectation that
I
has
would
already
like
been
90.
approved.
I would like 90, 60 for the architect, and 30 that we can work with the builder, and they'll be involved throughout the phase.
Okay.
90 days, but does that include the same thing with the morgue? I mean, is that they're
Yeah,
both together?
Well, no, they're two different, but yes and no. I mean, we have an amendment that we'll have to consider adding 200,000 for
Okay.
the morgue.
But it still
But it
stays
would be
meshed
within
with
that
So
the,
just-
project.
Just to rehash what Bart said, the agreement we've made with the contractor is we were gonna do those projects simultaneously.
Yeah.
So we would have shared management, which helped us in our cost.
exactly.
Right.
So I just
I
wanna
get
make
that.
sure
Right.
that
So-
it stays as a package.
Right, okay. So, we're coming up on time for the regular meeting. This certainly can go past that,
Judge
but
Rich, have anything you want to say?
is there anything specific you want to say about that? And certainly we'll be talking about it when we come into the regular committee meeting here in just a few minutes to also ask questions of these folks. But I think what we're hearing them say is that, if we could get 90 days, for them to do some things, they could come back with and take us out from under some of these challenges we're staring at the moment. Is that what we're hearing say? Okay, and was there something you wanted to ask, or do you want to wait till committee?
I was just gonna ask Judge Rich, if this plan of putting this off 60, 90 days and how this is gonna be changed and stuff, if that still works great for the juvenile center that he's overseeing.
Yeah, and I just take the stance that beggars can't be choosers, you know. We'll take what we can get.
Mhm.
It's something I clearly from all we went through last year, I believe in sport. It's not, everybody thinks it's my detention center. It's not. I put kids in detention, and it's a matter of where we can put them. And,
Would minimum security versus maximum security give you heartburn? I think is really the significance where you're saying there may be some opportunity for savings, right?
Yeah, that's sort of what I was asking, Judge.
right.
It was the
And
minimum-
honestly,
yeah.
I'm not trying to be crass. That's not my problem. That's going to be the problem of the folks that are administering to it.
Okay.
What they're comfortable with, and their ability to isolate, and also I was sitting there thinking, I don't even know what the number is, but I do know that in the past, DCS has contracted with us because we did have a hardware secure facility. I don't know if it's going to cut some of that out, if that's going to be significant or not.
Yeah, we've had Kelly involved in these conversations, make sure we're going down the right path.
And she's truly the one that part of it.
Helpful, and she'll stay involved in the process if we move this direction with the finance community.
Okay.
And minimum, so the problem is it's easy for an architect to put a frame in something that everybody's definition of that frame is different. And so don't think because we say minimum security, that doesn't mean you can't perform exactly the same.
And I understand, it's not like they're going to just go in and out when they want to.
Right. But it,
Can I say something?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and I've talked to Kelly about this, and she already, Judge can nod his head or something, but she already screens children in violent, hardcore, whatever labels you want to put on them. She does not take them. And we have that option.
Right.
And even though we may have an out-of-county child, as I understood from her, if our facility were to get full, that child has to be come and gotten, so that our children always have first choice
Right,
on
yeah,
things.
we have first
And
dibs,
if a
for sure.
child is unruly, she sends them back.
Absolutely. All right. If we're comfortable, we'll close the study session, and because we're ready now to go into session. And certainly, again, as the committee, you can ask all these things. These folks are here, and we can pick right back up where we left off. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. So it's 4:17, so it's past the 4:15. We'll call the regular business meeting to order, and we'll ask for Commissioner Tony Smith to lead us in prayer.